Good morning. I am spotlit by the sun on this joyous Kamada Ekadashi, a day of fulfilling your deepest desires. Not necessarily your selfish desires, but what's in harmony with your truest nature. This is the first Ekadashi, which is considered an auspicious day in the Hindu calendar of the new lunar year. And it is said to be the one to observe if you only observe one. But why would you want to observe one? Well, before we get into that, I'd like to invite you, if you have any comments, to put them in the chat, any questions at all. If you're a subscriber, you can do that. If not, please subscribe, and you can do so next time. And as introduction, I am Atmadarshan, or Laura Santoro, initiated in the Saraswati lineage and part of Dharmic Kshetra Yoga. And those words are from the Bhagavad Gita. And a lot of these Ekadashi celebrations relate to Bhagavad Gita. In fact, it's said that chanting this particular sacred work, which is also a key text of classical yoga, will bring maximum benefits on this day. So, today's Ekadashi falls in an interesting time if you're a Westerner. For example, I was raised Catholic, and this is falling during the time of Lent, leading up to Easter, a time when we are asked to consider our sins and wrongdoings, and in fact, fast in different ways. And on Ekadashi, it's also recommended that you fast. And today's particular Ekadashi is about dealing with your guilt. And one could also say sin, which in the Bhagavad Gita is the word papam. However, sin is not necessarily the meaning we would associate it with in the West, like something I have to be punished for by an outside source. The idea of sin in the Bhagavad Gita is anything that leads you away from your truest nature. And nobody has to punish you for it because you end up punishing yourself. So this is, how do we remove the tendency to act against what we know to be in our best interests? There's a story that goes with this, and then we will have some Bhagavad Gita chanting. If you happen to have the book, oh, the sun is so lovely today, Hearing the Song of Your Soul, you can grab that. You can also look in the comments for the verses we'll be using from this poetic translation, or you can listen. So the story of today, and each Ekadashi has its own story, is of a Gandharva, a heavenly musician named Lalit, and he has a wife, Lalita, and he is so in love with his beautiful wife that he thinks of her almost constantly. Well, one day, Lalit is invited to perform for a king. And as he's performing, he makes mistakes. He makes mistakes in his singing, especially singing the end of one song completely incorrectly. And in the court of this king are some snakes, and one is a jealous snake. He's greedy for the renown and the beauty and the talent of Lalit. And that snake says to the king, obviously, Lalit is distracted from performing for you by desire for his wife. When the king hears this, his eyes turn red. He gets angry and he pronounces a horrible curse on Lalit. He is to become a hideous, giant, monstrous, demonic thing. As Lalit transforms, he runs from the court, but his wife goes by his side. As he wanders the country and driven by his demonic passions, he commits many atrocities, many sins, including eating people. All this time, his wife stays and at one point encounters a great sage and says, "Oh, sage, how can my husband remove the guilt from his sins and become his original self again, his true self?" And the sage says, on this particular day, Kamada Ekadashi, observe the prescribed fast and your husband will return to who he was, who you love. The wife did this. Lalita did this. And, woo, as she did this, the light came out and transformed her husband back very quickly. And it is said that anything we observe on this auspicious day transforms us quickly into our truest selves. So when we look at this idea of demonic, again, demonic would be something that leads us into bondage. So it's a little different from the idea of sin, papam. Being demonic means you are bound and bound to do things against your will, especially, while being restored to your divine nature. Lalit was a heavenly musician, brings freedom. So what we'll do today is focus on chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita, which is called the yoga of the division between the divine and the demonic. And remember, these don't have to be outside forces, although they can be definitely viewed that way. They are inner forces as well. And part of the reason the stories of Ekadashi are related to Bhagavad Gita is many of them are about Krishna, the hero of Bhagavad Gita, talking to King Yudhishthira, who is also a major character in that work. Yudhishthira will say, "Why should I observe this particular holy day?" And Krishna will say, "Here's the story of why." And you may notice there are a lot of holy days or holidays in traditions from the Indian subcontinent. And one of the reasons we could think of for that is that every day truly is a holy day if we just choose to see it that way. It's a holiday. And in fact, this Kamada Ekadashi is in some ways a new year. We've had many New Years. We've had the Western New Year. We've had the Chinese New Year. We've had the spring as a new year. We just had this idea of Navratri, 9 nights dedicated to the divine feminine being over. And this is another new year. It's always a chance to start afresh, to become who you really want to be. You know, I love live because when I set up, the light was perfect. The light is always perfect. Yes, and this is part of accepting. We are always perfect. We try our best, we let it go, and we just do what we can do. And this will apply to the chanting. You can listen, you can try to chant. So one of the reasons I'm using hearing the song of your soul, and if you want to know more about the stories, this is just the translation it's in, but understanding the song of your soul has the stories, is that the translation is in the original meter of Bhagavad Gita. You can hear its lyric beauty as it's meant to be heard, and it is meant to be chanted aloud. Oh, if you would like to join in some chanting, as you prepare, I'll just give you a few relevant points about today's chanting. The very first verse is about led astray by imaginings enveloped in delusions, snare. And this can relate to Lalit and the accusation that instead of being present, he was perhaps lustfully imagining or thinking of his dear wife. He got sucked out of the present. And then the idea of hell, different than the Western idea of hell. But there are said to be, and in the Bhagavad Gita, this is explained, 3 gates to what we would call hell, destructive to the self: desire, anger, and greed. And those are represented in the story. The idea that Lalit desired his wife so much that he was totally distracted and could not stay present. The greed, the jealous greed of the snake who started the whole curse, but the king who continued and pronounced the curse, red-eyed with anger. So these 3 qualities are represented in the story. In verse 5, 16:5, and they're out of order to kind of enhance the narrative effect today. The last sentence, grieve not, Pandu's son, for you were born to the divine. Krishna is speaking to Arjun, and Arjun represents us. Krishna represents our deepest self. And what is happening here is our deepest self is telling us that you are inherently divine. All you have to do is uncover that. You don't have to change. But if you can control those three gates to hell, great. And this can go in with the idea of fasting. Today, many of us think of fasting food, giving that up. But even harder and perhaps more effective is today try to fast from one of the threefold qualities destructive to yourself. Try to give up desire, selfish desire, not the desire to become your trueness, your true nature, or to help others, but selfish desire, or give up anger, especially driving, and give up greed. Pick one of those and give it a shot. But if that sounds too hard, then in Lent, we as Catholics give things up or add something on to our daily spiritual practice. Verses 1 through 3 there list some qualities that you can add on today. You can make a special effort at one or more of these, and that can be a way of observing Ekadashi and getting back to your true nature, feeling the release of guilt, feeling a reconnection to who you are, and rebooting whatever you need to reboot in life. Okay. Well, I will invite you to become steady with the verses to hand or listening. I will start the chanting. You'll probably pick up the rhythm pretty quickly. And it should all be the same rhythm. Some days the rhythm varies, but it should all be the same rhythm today. And notice what these words bring forth in you. So if you'd like to chant along, join in anytime. Threefold are the gates to this hell that are live. This is live. I'm starting. Sorry, I skipped one. I wanted to get to the good stuff. Let's start at 16. All right. I forgive myself. Here we go. Verse 16. Led astray by imaginings, enveloped in delusion snare, addicted to assuaging lusts, they fall into a squalid hell. Threefold are the gates to this hell that are destructive to the self. Desire, anger, and greed, thus one should turn away from these three things. The divine state leads to freedom. The demonic is said to lead to bondage. Grieve not, Pandu's son, for you were born to the divine. Fearlessness, purity of heart, staunchness in study of wisdom, giving sense control, sacrifice, self-study, effort, forthrightness, non-violence, truth, non-anger, abstinence, peace, supportiveness, kindness to all, non-greediness, gentleness, modesty, stillness, brilliance, forgiveness, steadiness, pureness, absence of hate and pride. These belong to one born with a divine nature, Bharata's child. Nice. So this is the true self singing to your little ego. And it's about learning to forgive our mistakes, which are often caused by distraction. Like, for example, today for me, I'm somewhat distracted by trying to give you the best and most perfect experience I can. That's kind of like my wife in the story. Um, but this leads to guilt anytime I feel that I've made a mistake. And I think a lot of us are trying in daily life to often hold ourselves to a standard of perfection that just might not be realistic. And as the Gita reminds us over and over again, just do your best, do your best, do your best, and learn self forgiveness, because when we become angry with ourselves, we curse ourselves to become those demonic beings that cause suffering to the ones we love and to our own selves. But if we can reconnect with the divine by perhaps observing one of these beautiful qualities today, then we refresh our relationship to the divine light within. That light, that true nature, which, as Krishna keeps telling his friend, is present within us. All we have to do is uncover it. Well, thank you very much for joining me this morning, this bright, beautiful morning, the new year for you, a new year, a new relationship to yourself. You don't necessarily have to be anything different. You are divine. You just have to remember that. Remember that today and see what happens for your life. Watch for more events. Please check us out. welcomingdestiny.com, dharmikshetrayoga.com. Keep watching the YouTube channel. Subscribe for notifications. I'm trying to see you. There you are. Again, this is Atmadarshan. I hope to see you again soon. Where's the button? There it is.